So each user or each laptop has its own local database where store the credential of the user and the password, right? But once the user will grow or start to grow, it will be very hard to go to each laptop, then create a user, and for that user create a password. In this example, we give only an illustration, and we assume that we have only five users. But what if we are in a big company? It's very hard to manage a hundred of users. So for that, Microsoft came with a solution called the Active Directory. So what is the mission, or what is the task of Active Directory? Is instead of create separately on each laptop a user and password, but instead of that, we will create another laptop here, and we will install on it Active Directory. Then we will create a domain controller on it, right? Then on this domain controller, we'll create users and password. So, and then we will join this laptop to this domain, all of them. And the same thing here. So now, here I will create the list of users and list of password. So, for example, if Abd Ali come to this laptop and enter Abd Ali and this password, it will log in. If he come to this laptop and create and then type this Abd Ali and this password, it will sign to it. So instead of having Abd Ali that will restrict Abd Ali only to one laptop, means that only Abd Ali can log in only from this laptop. But when we create a domain controller, he can go whatever to laptop he wants, and then when he insert this credential, then this credential, instead of looking to the local database, it's going to look in the domain controller, and within the domain controller, right, we have the Active Directory that manage the users that we will create here. So every time when this laptop join to this domain, and when once user want to log in, it just need to insert password and its username, then this credential will go to the domain controller, then ask the domain controller whether if this user with this password exists or not. If it exists, then it will log in. Otherwise, it will face an issue of logging. So if you are familiar or if you have a background of network, this domain controller is like radius or tacox. So when you connect a radius with the router, and once the user wants to log in to that router, then the router will send that request to the radius and ask him whether if the user with that password exists on that remote server or not. If it exists, then it will let that user to get in. There are another features and there are another terms of this Active Directory: global search, sites, and etc. and many more. I will not cover all of them here, but I promise you to create separate video only for that, and they will explain it. I will explain all of that, and then I will use the AWS directory service that AWS give us to us. So for now, let us try to create a Windows server 2019 and try to connect to our domain controller and then create a user, right? And this user will create a workspace, Amazon workspace. It is a desktop. It is a desktop that AWS offer for its users. All right. So instead of having terminal, you have a desktop with interface using Amazon Workspace. So here I will create an EC2 instance and run on it Windows Server 8019. Then I will create a user. Then I will log in from this Amazon Workspace using that user credential. But at first, I have to join this workspace to the domain controller and tell the domain controller, look, if there is a user with the credential that I will insert here, then let him to log in. I will show you all of that, so just stay with me. So first thing I'm going to do is launch an EC2 instance for our Windows Server. Scroll down here, and they will go with the free tier. Select, and for the configuration, I will not use the default configuration because as you know that Windows Server need at least 4 GB to run, right? If you don't use this configuration, then your Windows Server will be very very slow and will feel so boring to continue and manage and create resource. So it's better to do not go with the default configuration because one CPU and one memory is not enough to run Windows on that. You using Windows Server and use that configuration. So instead of that, I will go with this configuration, right? Then configure. Then I will run only one instance. Then I want it to be on my own VPC and then in my public subnet. The next thing that I have to do is I have to join it to a domain controller that I have created earlier, abdelali.com. And then I have to create a role, right? Because I want to allow this EC2 instance to join to this domain controller. And to do that, we have to create some role and assign to that role some permission. So to enable our EC2 instance to join to that domain. So for that, let me go to the IAM service and create a role. So I'll click on roles. And then create a role. Common use case is EC2 instance. And for permissions, type SSM. Then here I scroll down here and they have the SSM directory service access and then manage instance core. So make sure to select these two permissions. Then next tag review and they will call it EC2 join domain. Then I will create that role. Another thing is I want to allow and give the permission to this EC2 instance to join to this domain. But I have also to give this domain a role to retrieve this credential that this EC2 instance, we will provide it